Okay, so it's now 12 o'clock by one of my clocks. So my name's St. John Walker. I'm going to be the chair of Animation Out in the Open, real-time events. And we have gathered together here a huge amount of talent and experience of people who've taken animation out of the sort of confines of the rectangle of the LED screen. Because we think of animation as being bound to that rectangle, but with the advent of laptops and powerful and cheap digital projectors, it's now possible to take animation onto the streets, as well as animate and process imagery in real time. So we've gathered together sort of a range of talent people who've worked at Glastonbury, Boomtown, Burning Man, as well as doing corporate events, civic celebrations, takeovers of spaces. So, you know, we're interested in how might animation students and people who are just getting started in animation get these skills and start to get into this area and maybe look at it as an alternative to the screen that they know and love on the desktop. So I'm going to now ask my esteemed guests to each say something about themselves and show some work. I'm going to be very cruel because we want to make sure there's time at the end for lots of questions. So please do let us know your questions that you have for either individuals or for the whole panel, and we'll look at those. I've got a whole range of questions myself, but I'm going to ask Tom Wall, first of all, of blinkinLAB, to tell us a bit about himself and show some imagery.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom from blinkinLAB. I've been working in live visuals for about 15 years, I guess. I sort of started off, I studied animation, but I'd always been interested in music and stuff, and then got into DJing because it was a good way of combining music and animation. So I've got a reel of some animation that I've done over the years, and it's not really showing it in the context of the spaces, but it's kind of showing the kind of animation that I like making for live events.
Thank you. Fire away. Share your screen. Thanks. Thanks, Tom. And I should explain there that obviously things won't run necessarily in real time on the screen. However, you can see Tom's work at blinkinLAB.com, and blinkin is spelt without a G. If you imagine blinkinLAB, it's blinkinLAB.com. So thanks for that little intro, Tom. I'm going to be brutal and move on to the next person now, and of course we'll hear from Tom much later. Matt Sharp from MoreEyes.co.uk. Matt, tell us about yourself.
Hey, how you doing? So yeah, I'm Matt. I work at MoreEyes, and my partner Pete's not here, but I think he's watching us. So hey, Pete, how you doing? And yeah, I come from a different background. I didn't really study formal animation initially before I got into it, and just was a bit of a raver. And like Tom, saw video and music as a way to sort of get into that scene. And yeah, just tinkering around at home, teaching myself stuff. And then it was always just a little hobby. And it's within, I don't know, maybe sort of last 15 years or something like that. We've sort of gone from putting up projectors ourselves and bed sheets on walls to then, you know, escalating up to live events and Glastonbury and Roskilde and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, and I'll show you just a little clip of some bits that I've managed to drag out from the studio. So let's share screen.
Thanks.
Okay, and this goes kind of all the way from early days of projection mapping right the way up to modern online streaming stuff, which is what we've had to pivot to now. So. Just skip through a little bit of these.
Great, thanks for that, Matt. And if you want to see Matt's work, it's moreeyes.co.uk. So have a look at that, and it'll play obviously more in real time on the website itself. So thanks, Matt. I'm now going to ask Andy from Fade In, Fade Out to introduce himself and tell us about what you do and show us some clip.
Sure. Hi, I'm Andy Ellis from Fade In, Fade Out. And now abbreviate that to FIFO, so I actually fit on the flyer. which is an in-joke with us VJs. So yeah, I cut my teeth in VJing about just over a decade ago. I actually kind of saw some of people like Tom's work, like Chasing Status and things like that, and he doesn't know this probably. And so that kind of thing kind of influenced me as you know, we started to pick up the kind of laptop VJing. I did a traditional graphic design degree and I bolted animation on it. I kind of self-taught myself After Effects Cinema 4D. And actually my first work, I ended up in central London at a place called Imagination, doing commercial motor show launches, so big LED screens and things like that. But by night, I was kind of pushing myself as a VJ because I was very much like the other guys into rave music, you know, doing shows for free, did you know, some of the early shows for the XX and things like that, you know, when they were just a little tiny band. But then quickly, I was fortunate enough to get a residency. I think I shared this with Tom at Ministry of Sound as well, and that really kicked me off into the kind of commercial side of festivals and working for producers. And I'm just going to show my current reel. This is very short and it kind of covers everything over the last kind of few years. All right, thank you.
Thank you, and I do feel cruel for sort of cutting you all down to trying to encapsulate what you do into a minute or two, so sorry about that. But again, you can see Andy's work on Fade In, Fade Out, all one word, .co.uk. Thanks. I'm now going to introduce, we're going to go international now, because I'm going to introduce Deltaprocess.it from Italy. Federico and Faye, would you like to tell us about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so Deltaprocess is a multimedia art collective. It started roughly 10 years ago. We've changed a few people during the years, but there's like a core team, which is about 6 people. These two are the main guys. And yeah, we basically started with projection mapping in buildings, the first few projects together with VJing. And then let's say we did a lot of stuff that has to do with like animation on different forms and in different type of environments, like scenographies, theaters,
holographic screens.
Yeah, holographic screens, dance shows. And lately, let's say in the last 5-6 years, we've been mostly specializing in clubbing and festivals, like music festivals, which has been like the sort of thing that flew us all over the world, especially in the last couple of years, from Australia to the US, you know. And well, the main music is psytrance, let's say, that has been growing a lot in the last few years. But yeah, we still keep on doing projection in buildings and trying to do our more like art residencies and art projects by ourselves here in Italy or around Europe. So we have our show reel as well, which has been basically, we just patched most of our reels together, especially for this presentation. Try to squeeze it in like 4 minutes, but we'll skip through a few because
make it shorter.
Yeah, to try and make it shorter. So yeah, the sound won't be great at some points, but let's try.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that was great because it shows some of those sort of questions we may get onto about sort of animation at scale and in spaces. So thanks very much for that. And that's deltaprocess.it if you would like to see that online. I'm now going to ask Dan Shutt. Hi
guys.
Dan Shutt from We Are Midnight to tell us a bit about himself and show a bit of his work.
Cool. Yeah, so I come from this from a slightly different angle in a way, because I mean, I've been a visual effects artist for the last 26 years, and it's only really, I'm kind of like a baby compared to these guys in this industry. I've only been doing this about five years now. But yeah, essentially, yeah, as I said, I've worked in kind of, film, TV, games, lots of that. And a lot of these skills have come into play as, progressed into this industry. But essentially, yeah, kind of started about 5 years ago doing live events. It was mainly my partner, Ella, who kind of introduced me to all of this. She, she'd do a lot of experimentation, a lot of installation work, things like that. And I think that's kind of where we started, actually. We started with installation, and that got us into a few festivals, bits and pieces. And then we started pushing more, doing concert visuals and moving into, again, festivals, doing quite a lot of like large scale bits and pieces. But yeah, it's been kind of from there, and there's been lots of interesting kind of twos and fros. I'll show you some of our stuff. This is a bit of an old show reel, but let's see, where is it? There we go. Share.
The moon swallows the light from the day spent with me. It could be anything or anywhere I've yet to see. And if I found you now, would you see me a stranger? And will I ever belong in your atmosphere? In your atmosphere. Ooh.
Thanks, Dan. And I think I noticed a coronavirus graphic in there somewhere, but maybe maybe I'm just dreaming. We've got one more guest. I think we've got one more. It's Joris from Prismax.be, and again, if you go to Prismax.be, you can see his work. But I'll hand over to you, Joris, to say a bit about yourself and show some imagery.
Hello, yeah, I'm Joris. I'm from Belgium. I've been a VJ for about 21 years now. I've studied, actually, I studied computer sciences, but somebody in a club asked me 21 years ago if I would VJ there in the weekends, which turned out into a four evenings a week residency, and I just quit my computer stuff, I mean computer sciences, and I just started doing VJing. And then after a year or 7, I started attracting more people, more into the business. And right now we're about 18 people working on visuals. We're doing projection mappings. We're doing a lot of VJing. We're working on a lot of festivals, touring with some DJs, but we're also doing more classical stuff like theater and musicals. So it's very diverse what we do, and I made a small movie of some things we did in the past year. You will also see a few virtual things there because of COVID. We're really focusing now on virtual production. So there's a bit of that in the video as well. Let me see if I can share it.
Great, thanks, Joris, and great to see that stuff. Obviously, a lot of this, has to be experienced at scale. We're seeing sort of monumental kind of events here on small screens. So, bearing that in mind, I'm now going to ask you a series of questions, and I'll keep an eye on the chat here because messages will get passed on from the audience out there to us. But I've got a range of questions at the moment, so I'm going to ask all of you. And because we're a huge bunch, I'd ask you to just raise your kind of hand or give me a nod so I know that you want to answer them. So, you know, we don't have to all answer the same question. My first question is just to help out a lot of our audience. Joris mentioned virtual production, but there's something else I sort of want to sort of get you to define, and that is projection mapping. Could you tell us a bit about projection mapping and maybe make it clear to the audience by saying if an example of where you've used it? So looking for somebody in the, and Tom's gone for it first, so I'm going to ask Tom, tell us about projection mapping. What is it and have you used it?
Basically, it's sort of making perspective matched animation fit into a kind of defined space on a building or structure, and trying to give the illusion that what you're seeing is actually there and like the architecture is coming alive, basically.
Thank you. That's a really good definition. Anybody else want to sort of say a time that they've done that or projected onto buildings with that particular technique?
Sure.
Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, and also it can be just used to enhance any kind of irregular shapes. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, there's a lot of traditional stuff out there where a building may crumble. A lot of the stuff I did out at Burning Man is just to kind of enhance that surface. So it could be just color washes or bits of graphics. So there's a wide spectrum of techniques.
Yeah, also, if I could say something, we could say, there's really few limits on what projection mapping can do on surfaces. Like the limits are the materials. If they're glossy, if they're, you know, too dark, then it's a bit problematic. But if you have the right power, you can project like almost in anything. So
but a white building is better.
Yeah, a white building is better. A white screen is better. Special stats made for it, but we project on many stages. For instance, in Psytrance, which are absolutely like super complicated and very difficult to, with a lot of details. But there's in some ways you can always like find you know, some interesting things to do on the surfaces. So also on trees, for instance, which might not be the ideal surface, but it's possible through certain techniques to give some more illusions of those shapes too.
Yeah, thanks. So it's all about the illusion of space by projecting onto 3D objects in some way. I'm going to ask a question now again to all of you, and that is, for you, what's the most exciting technology at the moment? I mean, is there a new software or is there a new equipment that gets you excited? And Dan was hand up first.
No, I mean, to be honest, the shift into real-time technologies is definitely the most interesting thing now. You know, up until recently, we've been mostly working on, you know, rendering out canvases and then projecting. These days, we're essentially building almost like a little toy for us, you know, where we can interact with like a 3D geometry in real time, and that's being projected. So it allows us much more creativity. We can, you know, sync things with music, as in have it coming live. We can bring in signals live. Recently, obviously, you know, the move into Unreal is really interesting. There are other softwares. I mean, we've been mostly for this kind of stuff using Notch, which is excellent when you have to get things done in a very fast turnaround. Notch has been amazing for us, but the rendering capabilities of Unreal are pretty stunning. So for longer term projects where you've got a bit more development time, that's that's really interesting. Definitely where we want to be.
Thanks, Joris. You.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, because of COVID, we started looking into Unreal. Beforehand, we were working in Cinema 4D together with a renderer, but then, yeah, everything changed for us. A scene that had to render for a week on our GPU farm, all of a sudden had to almost runs real time. So I wished we would have discovered Unreal Engine for our profession much earlier than this, that we had the time to experiment with it.
Yeah, and just before I bring Dan in again, and then Tom, just to explain that Unreal Engine is a games engine for those who are not familiar with it, which is now being adopted by other disciplines and other areas because of its real-time capabilities. So I think I'm going to bring Dan back in, and then I'm going to bring Tom.
Yeah, just a very quick thing. Joris just reminded me, actually, as an example of these crazy turnarounds. A couple of years back, we did a festival, Boomtown, we did, and we were rendering out for a stage. I think we were rendering out, it took about 3 days to render just one sequence for this thing, because it's a huge canvas. And then as an experiment last year, I adapted it for a real-time engine using Notch, and it runs at 40 frames a second, and it looks almost identical. So, this is, the way things are changing quite drastically.
Thanks. Tom, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say was these softwares are all well and good, but at the end of the day, they're just sort of mostly used for rendering. You still need something to put in them. You can't just turn up and go, here's a project. You still need to build that project. And so you're still going to be using the traditional tools, Maya, Cinema 4D, to build your assets, make your textures, do all that kind of offline first before you get into the real-time element of it.
Yeah, the show won't just produce itself based on what software you use. I think actually we've, hopefully, Chantal, we've answered your questions kind of both at the same time. Chantal's asked, what is your favorite 3D software and what visual trends do you predict for next year? Just on the favorite 3D software, we've heard about Cinema 4D and we've heard about Unreal and I guess Notch as well. Anything else that we should tell our audience? Dan, once again.
So I'm just really excited about this stuff. I've been especially using with Unreal, using Houdini and Houdini Engine is just what I'm so excited about at the moment. Just the ability to build assets, then bring them into something like Unreal and update them in real time. I've just finished a project, a virtual production project, like 5 o'clock in the morning, 2 nights ago. And yeah, we used, because the brief was very open and they didn't really lock any design down, and I knew that they were probably going to change a lot of stuff. We built it all in Houdini, and yeah, just being able to get feedback from the client, and then just kind of, I basically made a digital asset where I could just drag some sliders around and then go, okay, how about that? And being able to just kind of deliver that direct to them. That was really good. Cool.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to make this too much into a tech fest, because as Tom reminded us, it is about people and creativity as well. So I'm going to move on to a question now. There's something quite exciting about sort of people being at an event and sharing an animation or sharing visuals. But clearly over the last few months, that's not been possible, or certainly not so possible because of COVID, etc. So how have you individually adapted or changed the way you work so you still create work without having physical events? Does anybody want to come on that? Matt?
I think there's been quite, well, obviously because of COVID, there's a rise in streamed events, and we've taken part in some live streamed sort of festivals where we've had to build the content and whatever else, and they're built on the virtual stages, like the stuff that Joris was showing, but also sort of working with DJs has allowed a lot of like home streaming and stuff, and like smaller scale studio type things as well. So we've been able to sort of do some work towards that sort of stuff where you're integrating, whereas before it was, you've got the artist here and you've got the screens here above them. It's now a lot more about putting the subject within the animation and stuff now. I think they've realised now that it's taken a year, but people are working out how they can monetize events now, and we're getting a lot more one-off gigs, live stream events that are in a strange building, or they're done in like a sort of special warehouse set up or something like that. So people are sort of more focusing on, you know, I guess giving fans something while they're waiting for live events to come back online. And I think most of us here probably have all done that stuff because everyone's had to pivot now. So.
Yeah, anybody else? Joris, you were going to say something?
Yeah, for us the same. I mean, at first we were the VJs coming to the festival. You would ask, what's the pixel map, what's the connection type, and that's about it. And now we've kind of transitioned ourselves to creating that complete experience. We build the stages, we build the world, and demand has been increasingly growing. Like we started off with the Tomorrowland Digital Festival. Right now there's about 5 other festivals in production here. The only thing for us is like, yeah, the massive amount of work. I mean, we need to create everything, whereas beforehand we only had to create the visuals matching the stage that was already built there. That's the big difference for us.
So could you just maybe give a bit more detail about what the viewer sees at Tomorrowland or one of these sort of virtual events? How do they engage? Can they move around in a 3D space? How does it work?
No, we chose that we are the boss. We have a director actually showing what he would show on the real festival live stream, because yeah, the subjects, they're all shot. They're shot with tracked cameras, but still the image of them, it's a 2D plate. It's a 2D space. So if you give everybody the possibility to move around freely, you have 10,000 cameras moving around, and everybody will see that it's actually just a 2D thing. So that's why we say, hey, we are the director. We use Stipe tracked cameras. So everything looks as if it is 3D, but it's actually the DJs themselves. They're 2D characters.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to come in on that idea of pivoting it during COVID, first of all? Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to say, sort of we did, one of the jobs that we did was you were able to sort of steer through a web browser, like a web GUI. And I showed a little bit of that in my show reel. So it allowed people to go around a virtual space, but then you could actually watch a traditional, you know, flat performance on your screen if you wanted to. Whereas one of the other events we did, which a couple of the guys here also were involved in, was the Lost Horizons Glastonbury virtual reality. So you could either navigate on your laptop with, you know, arrow keys and move around, or it was built for Oculus. So you could actually get inside virtual reality and walk around with your avatar, meet up with your friends who were all dressed like giant chickens and whatever else. And that kind of, I don't know, gives it a little bit more extra depth. But again, like Joris said, the DJs were just green screened on a plate. So if you kind of peek behind the curtain and move around, you do lose that illusion. So you do need a little bit of control.
So it's still smoke and mirrors and being magicians. Fede?
Yeah. Also, we tried to experiment a couple of things that were quite intriguing in our own space, like in our house, because, well, as you guys know, in Italy has been the first country to be locked down, and we had a pretty long period of time we couldn't really go out at all. So we tried to invent, and some institutions also, like a theater of the city or city, promoted this online streaming event, and we organized like a secret sneak out of home to get to the house of a friend of us, which has really nice like top floor rooftop attic. And basically I asked my friend to take all pictures of the room. So we recreated the room in 3D and simulated all this light effects and stuff as if it was like produced inside of the room, all with Unity. And these two guys that were there in the show, they were doing some acting and some music. So we did try to, let's say, evolve the concept of a show, a live show in streaming with a live mapping inside.
Like a theater show.
Yeah, either like theater show or like film. Some parts of the last part of our show reel was showing a little bit of these things. Like even last night we did shoot a movie inside of our living room, basically setting up 5 projectors, filling up all the living room, and a friend was shooting with our good camera, all of this kind of like 360 experience inside of our own space.
So it sounds like under lockdown, a lot more people getting involved with 3D and virtual spaces. You're kind of making your own spaces as opposed to going out and shooting or projecting into a space. Anybody else got anything to say about pivoting over the last few months, or shall I move on? I'm looking around. Tom.
I guess a lot of the time when, you know, before COVID, you're just sort of on the treadmill and you're like just making stuff, and you're not really maybe learning new software and, you know, experimenting for your own satisfaction, basically. So it's been kind of good to have a bit of space to do that kind of stuff in a way.
Andrew, did you have your hand up? I'm not sure.
I was just going to talk about the kind of virtual spaces side, because to start off with, I think as people were saying, things were kind of, you know, live streaming in the bedroom. And I think over that last year, people come to the terms that a virtual space could be any space. Some of the commercial work I've been doing is looking at art gallery spaces. And the first thing they wanted to do was recreate a gallery that exists. And my argument was kind of like, well, you can do anything. So you create a virtual space and a virtual version. If you look at some of Joris's work as well, where it gets a bit more, you know, fantastical. We wouldn't necessarily be able to build some of that stuff, but now, you know, there's no limit.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to move. Oh, sorry, Dan first, and then Fede.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just very quickly going to say, I mean, this isn't really about live events so much, but one area where it seems a lot of people in our industry are pivoting towards, because obviously, you know, the industry has been slightly decimated because of COVID, is virtual production. There's a lot of virtual production. There's a lot of kind of vendors as well, people who, you know, build the screens and the stages and things like that, now using those same LED screens to do their own virtual production, or, you know, support virtual production, things like that. And a lot of 3D artists who are working like that as well. But yeah, it's just another interesting area.
Thanks, Fede.
Yeah, so before the crisis, we applied to this light festival in Rome, which is called RGB Light Experience. That basically was supposed to be around one of the districts of Rome, like a different installation spread around. But since there were no safety in running an event of such kind, they decided to basically put a lot of equipment in 3 trucks and go around this district, selecting 4 different areas of the city. And with lights and projectors, all the artists that were selected, they're able to, let's say, do a little thing in each one of these places of the city. It's like kind of a urban guerrilla mapping and lighting festival kind of thing. And moving from, like, I don't know, old Roman arches to, I don't know, some highway post-industrial place. So it's from the 19th to the 22nd, 23rd, every night in a different place. And with people, well, they decided to choose spots where there's people from buildings that can also see that, whether they're in curfew after 10 o'clock, they'll still be able to face to the window. And this is a really interesting type of project that goes beyond the limits of locking down, or, you know, they have permissions to go out, and they'll be streaming all the event as well. So this is another form also.
Well, that's really interesting, that idea of sort of guerrilla animation out on the streets. Has anybody else been involved with that kind of going out, and what are the rules? I mean, there might be a few animation students on this call who think, oh, I've got a projector and I'd like to have a go out there and project onto the side of, I don't know, Houses of Parliament or Buckingham Palace or whatever. Does anybody know if anything about the rules for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. So you do have to get permits to do on certain buildings. You can get away with doing guerrilla style quite a lot. I did some work with Fendi, doing some guerrilla projection all around London. It was actually done in big cities around the world as well. We all did it on the same night. And that was just for influencers to take photos and hashtag Fendi. but you can get in trouble. We did get busted down at down at South Bank for kind of being a little bit parked illegally, and then they're like, "What are you doing?" And then someone's got a trolley with a massive projector on, and it's kind of a bit obvious that you're not really doing what you should be doing. But I mean, a bit like how Banksy does things where, you know, he puts on a high-vis jacket and no one kind of questions that authority. So if you look like you're purposely doing it, then you get away with it. If you kind of look a bit shady, you don't.
Anybody else got anything to add to that before we all get locked up? No? Okay, great. I'll move on then in that case. Thanks. Here's a question again about sort of content, I guess, rather than the technology, and that is, how do you know after you've done an event or a gig or a, you know, played something, how it's gone? How do you get that kind of feedback? You know, if you make an animation and you show it on a screen at a festival, you kind of get feedback. But if you're producing a whole space with multiple projections, how do you know when it's gone right? Tom.
So if you're like live VJing, like one of the ways that I notice is when people's phones come out and they start filming what you're doing. That's always good. And then, yeah, sometimes people come up to you at the end of the night saying, you know, they enjoyed the visuals or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of your client that you have to impress really, and they give you feedback as well, generally.
Anybody else got to add to that? How do you know?
I talk a bit about that. I mean, having spanned sort of commercial stuff and kind of, you know, festival contemporary stuff, I think Tom's right. It's about whether the client kind of comes over to you at the end excited and being like, you know, and shows you his phone and they're like, this was great and all the rest of it. But then you have the flip side where things go wrong as well, where, you know, you can have someone standing next to you going, hey, you know, hey, what's this? Why have you done that? And you're like, okay, we'll change colors, or I'll make the logo bigger, you know. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts depending on who you're working with. But, you know, I think some of the most satisfying things is actually if you go on to like YouTube maybe a week or so later, and then you can find some of those things that were shot by fans, and you're like, oh, great, you know, actually someone, you know, made an effort to pay attention to that. But, you know, we're supposed to be kind of in the background, you know, it's an ambience to support the main act, unless you're, you know, someone that's, you know, an AV artist where they're doing the music and the visuals. You know, the live visual act is to, you know, emphasize everything else that's going on. It's a combination of pyro, smoke, you know, fireworks, sound, lighting, the visuals, you know.
Great, thanks. Matt.
I guess just to play on what Andy said there, like we've had a couple of clients where we've actually ended up as where we normally would be in the VJ booth or front of house, where they've gone, no, you've got to be on stage with us, like as part of the live show. You know, and we've done sort of festivals and tours where me or my business partner have had to actually be on stage, and the VJ is actually introduced to the crowd, and they say, like, you know, and on live visuals and stuff. So you know, you kind of go from being the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain to being like shoved out in front of everyone, in front of, you know, massive 10,000 festival crowd or whatever it is, and that's a little bit nerve-wracking.
So do people know these days that, you know, this isn't all just programmed by a machine, but there are people sort of as artists behind it?
Yeah, well, that's it. When you get a big cheer when they introduce you and saying this guy's on live visuals, because everyone probably thinks you've been checking your emails or noodling on a synthesizer or something like that. So when they go, oh, and so, and then you get a big cheer along with the rest of the band, that's you know, decent feedback.
Thanks. Joris, you were going to say something.
Yeah, things have changed a little bit over the years. When I started out VJing 20 years ago, well, I don't think it was 20 years ago, but like 15 years ago, a VJ would always be on the lineup, on the poster of the event. And there was even a DJ Mag top, well, I don't know, top 20 VJs or something. Mm-hmm. That all disappeared. We all moved a little bit more to the background. Not that I mind, I don't want to be on a poster or whatever, but yeah, things changed a little bit. Also because there's more VJs, I think. Back then there were like 5 or 6. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think just
Andrew.
Yeah, just to add to that changeover kind of happened sort of maybe 8 to 10 years ago, where actually at Miami Music Conference we had top 10 VJs, and there was a strange mix between VJs that actually were DJing with the video or kind of doing this kind of, you know, real-time kind of what we kind of do. And it didn't really, has still not really been defined. You know, it's quite, you know, if you read the Wikipedia kind of entry on VJing, you know, it's a big debate what it actually kind of is.
And so do you mind being called VJs then, or is that sort of out of fashion and there's some new word, Joris?
Most of the time people think that I'm on MTV presenting videos, I mean, music videos. That's what, when I say, yeah, I'm a VJ, that's what you do. And then I have to explain, no, and then people still don't understand, but yeah.
So what should we call you then?
Not vidiots.
I pivoted to live visual artist to catch everything. That's how, you know, but you know, I used to be, as Joris said, you know, we were VJs, but there was this confusion about what that meant because there were so many different kind of versions of it.
I think being a VJ is like only one aspect of it as well, because, you know, the actual sort of performance side of it is like 1 hour out of the many hours and days and weeks that you put into creating the show. So, you know, animation and, you know, filming, photography, all sorts of aspects go into it before you even get to press buttons in front of a DJ, basically. So
yeah, on that sort of thing about VJs, obviously, and showing it also sort of in your reels. Naturally, it's usually quite fast-paced, you know, beat-based stuff. I just wondered, is there room for more meditative spaces, slower, for want of a better word, chill out spaces? And have you kind of worked in that area? And Dan, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done a few ambient sets with various artists where things are much more slow paced, and then also moving into kind of installation design. Some of the ideas that we've worked with are about meditative states and things like that as well. So yeah, definitely we kind of you bounce around a lot of different genres, and sometimes it's really nice to go out of that fast-paced stuff and do something. The ambient stuff, you can be very, I mean, normally we have to work very, very fast and, you know, hit the beats, hit the drops, all that kind of stuff. With ambient stuff, you can kind of really slowly progress stuff, which is really nice. But yeah.
Anyone else got anything to add?
I think it, like, you know, when you talk about VJing specifically, it depends on the music. Like, if you're working with music that's kind of got a 5-second attention span, then your visuals are going to probably have the same kind of thing. But, you know, if you're working with more sort of music that progresses over a longer time, like techno or whatever, then you can sort of follow the pace of that, really. And if you're full on intense all the time, and it's too much, and people will just switch off. So you need to have that contrast of pace and intensity, otherwise it doesn't work.
Thanks, Fedi and Faye, and then Matt.
Yeah, there's something that has come out mostly recently in bigger scales, which is these like big immersive installations in warehouses where you can just go walk in and you have, I don't know, hundreds of square meters of projections, floor to the ceiling to everywhere. And there's also another type of use of it is projection mapping, maybe not like it's still like screens, it's still like kind of room like with like vertical platform, not different type of screens, but this is like something that is coming along with the VR also experiences, because you can basically transpose the VR environments into a room scale or big room scale, and that brings another level of interaction with the audience also, which is pretty interesting, because you have a lot of different places to look at and a lot of details, and in my opinion it's got something more than just a VR video, because you can really use space and you can mix projection mapping with the VR concept in a pretty interesting way.
Thanks, Matt.
We've worked with some I guess modern classical composers. We've done some stuff that's been, obviously the music was not necessarily just ambient, but just it wasn't beat-based work and stuff, and that is I guess it's a different style of progression as well when you're working closely with someone, and it's a bit more, you know, it's not just like you can cut any loop to a beat because you know it's going to fit. It's all strange time signatures and very relaxed stuff. And I think doing stuff for more meditative spaces as well. We've been asked before to provide visuals for like meditation domes and stuff. And I've done some installations where the visuals were actually driven by the user's heartbeat. So we connected them all up to finger sensors and had everyone in a dome. And then the visuals and music were generated by the information feedback coming from their bodies, like heart rate, pulse oximetry and stuff, to create like an ambient space for people. And then the more people that joined in, then the more it filled the space, which is, yeah, quite a good use of, I guess, like microcomputers and other sorts of tech, and also animation and real time, but in a quite a chilled ambient style. So.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing about biofeedback as well. You know, what the user does affects the visuals and the space. On that sort of tip, I wondered if anybody could talk about the sort of the most unusual space or unusual gig, if you like, that they've done, and sort of which may be different, because we've talked a bit about sort of this idea that some people might have of like, you know, put up a bed sheet and get a projector on a laptop and you're away, and you know how much more sort of sophisticated everything is nowadays. So what about the most unusual kind of performance that you've done? I think Tom, you started off your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, sort of pixel maps, like basically getting bigger and bigger. I mean, one of the most, like the biggest things that I've done was the Fremont screen in Vegas. It's like a 1/4 mile long LED screen. So to make something for that, you've got to kind of, you know, be aware of lots of constraints of how fast things can move and like that sort of thing. And then, yeah, like other clubs and stuff, like pixel maps, sort of 15K wide pixel maps, you know, starts getting a bit crazy.
Yeah, so that does come back to this idea of, you know, animation at scale and, you know, monumental animation. Joris, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, talking about scale, like we've been working in China quite a bit now, and clubs are really like popping up like mushrooms over there. But just the scale, they all use like 3mm LED walls, and then you got like 4K outputs. It's like almost impossible to create content for. Well, now with Unreal it becomes a bit easier again, but still it's too much, I think. But coming back to the location, I think the most special location I ever did the show was we created an LED pyramid in front of the pyramids in Giza. So that was quite a special location. Way too warm, but it was nice. And I almost got arrested because I put two no, actually I put two squares that were turning in each other, and one of the guys of the police thought I put the Star of David on the screen, so the army was on the way to arrest me. And no joke, I had to flee to the to the airport to get out. So, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad you made it. Dan, I think you were next with your hand.
Yeah, actually, I was just reminded by what Tom was saying. Actually, like this strange kind of sometimes what we'll project onto. One of the stages that we've done quite a lot is the gas tower stage in Glastonbury. And the thing that makes it odd and also quite difficult to work with is the fact that it's a full 360 cylindrical stage. And you actually might have seen a little bit of the virtual version of it on the end of Matt's reel there. That is actually a physical stage that exists in Glastonbury as well. Yeah, building stuff for that. It's, you know, the first time we did it, we did it's 16K all the way around, and we made a 10-minute film to run on it. And working with a 3D camera, where you have to think about what's always going to be behind you, but also, you know, if you tilt a 3D camera, you end up looking at the sky from the back end. So it's also in some ways quite limiting, but at the same time, it's this crazy immersive kind of space that you can work in. It presents some really interesting kind of problems.
Thank you. We're at the end of our hour, but I'm going to continue for a short while anyway, because I think this is really interesting. And just a reminder, if anybody's got any questions, it's not too late to pop them on the chat, and we'll be past them and we'll try and answer them. I think, sorry, I'm so excited. I missed hands up there. I think, Matt, you had something to say.
Oh yeah, we did a very odd gig once. We did it for a company called Ogilvy and Mather, and they're a huge advertising monster. And it was about syncing music and selling music and stuff. So we did a live stream a good few years ago from one of their offices in the middle of Canary Wharf, but everyone was still working. So they're all sitting there doing emails and calling on phones and stuff. And there's us and a string quartet. And they also asked us what we wanted for our rider. And we obviously, sex and drugs and rock and roll, said loads of booze. And then when we got there, the gig was actually 10 in the morning. Everyone else had like herbal teas and stuff. And then they went, there's the VJ's rider. And it was a crate of beer and a bottle of Jack Daniels. So yeah, we looked like animals. But yeah, that was good fun.
Yeah, there's very few animation gigs, animation commissions where you get a rider like that. So that sounds great. Andrew, you had something to say.
Yeah, it's just off the back of the kind of weird gigs. I think that it's something to say is the kind of extreme places you find yourselves. I mean, as Joris said, out in the Egyptian desert, and you find yourself in forests and all kinds of stuff away from internet connection. So you have to kind of preempt all this stuff so you can, fix things on the fly. I spent the last decade at Burning Man in the Black Rock Desert trying to project in the dust storms, and we're taking $20,000 projectors out there, which we do have to return. So we've got these, bespoke Pelican cases, which have got water cooling units and dust extraction in and all this kind of stuff. So the logistics get quite mad. But then also you get people still, because, there will be commercial DJs there come up to you and be like, oh, well, we need this on the screen. And you're like, well, okay, but I haven't got access to internet. I can't do any amends here, and it's there's a dust storm going on. So, I think we've all found ourselves in quite strange places over the years.
Fede.
Yeah, the most weird things we've projected onto were for a very particular psychedelic movie of a Moroccan friend of us that's been shot around a place in Italy.
And in Toulouse, in some other places, in some other locations.
Yeah, and in here we moved to a cemetery once, and we projected the cemetery for like a scary scene of the movie, and we enhanced it.
Spiritual scene.
Yeah, basically did a 3D scan of the whole place and just projected back onto it, and a Nazi bunker, still for this movie. I mean, it was all like mostly like light effects and things, but mapping actually the 3D models of the locations on top of them. So there's as I said before, there's many possibilities with projection that can be discovered in very unusual ways.
Tom.
Yeah, just another gig that we do is was the Arcadia Spider. That was a pretty mad thing to project on. Like, it's only got a kind of very thin strips on the legs, and then it's also got LED screens around the DJ booth. But then we also made pixel map content for the sort of these LED suits that the dancers wear. That they're kind of like alien jellyfish, and so it was like going from a kind of pixel map of about 100 pixels up to a kind of 2.5K, and getting all that to fit together. That's kind of a pretty interesting project to be involved with.
Well, it seems like a whole sort of new area that's opened up. That sort of well, not new for you maybe, but certainly new for a lot of animation students and people interested in animation to look at applying the work to that sort of the physical space or the virtual space. I'm going to ask you probably the most difficult question now for all of you, because we're just coming to the end, and that is many sort of let's call them traditional animators or animators on normal LED monitors, have heroes or role models, Miyazaki, Lasseter, whoever it might be, maybe not Lasseter these days. But do you have any heroes or role models in your line of work? They may not be sort of VJs, and they may not be sort of people like yourselves, but are there any sort of heroes, role models that you could mention now that people on this sort of call can maybe look into who do interesting visuals. And Matt was there first.
Yeah, when we were starting out, there were people like Vegetable Vision, who it's Adam Smith who works with the Chemical Brothers, and seeing that stuff was just like, wow, how are these guys doing this? And a lot of it was, overhead projectors with oil poured on them and lenses and things moving around and sort of really analog techniques, and that sort of stuff. And then the guys who were coming out of Ninja Tune Records, Hexstatic, doing sort of early audiovisual stuff, Cold Cut, Matt and John, that kind of early analog vibe. They were the people that I was sort of looking to and thinking, wow, what is this all about? I need to know about this stuff. So yeah, they were sort of early heroes of ours. And I think more modern people to sort of that I've looked at for inspiration is a guy called G Monk, who's someone who I think is pretty cool, who's gone on from doing all sorts of industrial stuff like Tom was showing earlier on, to like UI, like Minority Report type interfaces, and he now does a lot of actual 4K filming and like actually going to sort of real places and doing sort of in-camera film effects and stuff. So it's someone to look out for. Great, thanks. Tom, you had a few.
Yeah, I'd agree with Matt about those early sort of pioneers, Vegetable Vision, Hexstatic, and then there's like, the Light Surgeons and Defuse kind of grew out of that as well. They're a big influence on everyone. And like Rhythm Visuals as well was a kind of early sort of visual label that kind of put stuff out that was, kind of grew VJing into more of an art form, I suppose. But contemporary stuff, I try not to get influenced by people in the same field, and I'm more inspired by, say, architects and things like that, rather than trying to copy someone who's doing the same thing as me.
Sure. Are there influences for the rest of you guys who maybe aren't in the same field? Andrew?
Yeah, sure. I started off in commercial motion graphics, so I think that there's an older festival a while ago, 1.0 festival, a lot of contemporary motionographers, producing things for that. And I think the one of the directors that really stood out to me when I was at university was Johnny Hardstaff, and he did a video called Future of Gaming. It was for PlayStation, but it was this sort of nice, really contemporary, quite strange ambient piece. And that style and kind of warp recordings as well, their graphic design, I know that some of those designers did some of the early visual shows as well. There was kind of crossovers with Auteca and that kind of stuff. So, I've always come from a more graphic side, whereas, Dan has come from that VFX. So I think something that's a kind of roundabout way of saying is all of us have got these different tools and different backgrounds where it all comes together into this one live space. And so you're sort of a jack of all trades, pulling influence from everywhere, whether it's architecture or motion graphics.
Great, thanks. I don't think we can go any further with this heroes at the moment because we're just wrapping up. So just one last sentence from each person maybe, and that is, if you're interested in animation, maybe you're studying it at college or university, or maybe you're just interested, how do you start? What advice would you give to somebody just starting? And I'm just going to go round at Dan first.
Actually, I think the best thing for getting started in this industry for us was actually just getting involved with festivals, putting yourself out there. To be honest, at the start, there wasn't really any money in it. Festival budgets can be a bit strange. Essentially just going there. The great thing is that you're given a platform where they're happy that you want to get involved. So you get to go to the festival, you get to experience the whole thing, and you get to be creative and do your own thing on a grand scale. And then we've all become like, most of these guys, I know we're like a little family. We meet up. Well, this year we had to kind of do it virtually, but we meet up in a muddy field, a few times a year.
Okay, thanks. That does count as a sentence because there was no question, no full stops in that. Thanks, Dan. Anybody else? A single sentence of advice, Joris?
Well, actually, how I started out, I mean, I didn't have any graphical background, so back then there was tutorials, wasn't that popular yet, so I bought some books. Now, right now, if I would have to start again, just choose a software like a 3D software like Blender, for example, and just go onto YouTube and start following tutorials and start creating stuff. Put a goal for yourself, like I want to create a 3D city, and just start creating and learning. That's, I think, the fastest way.
Great. So just get some free software and practice. Matt,
Yeah.
sentence, please.
Yeah. Well, to nick a slogan from Nike or whatever, just do it. Just literally just do it. That's all. You know, the best thing I can say is just jump off and just do it. I didn't come from any sort of animation background at all. I used to work in healthcare, and I just thought, sod it, let's just do it. And you know, with the help of the internet, you can do some amazing things. So yeah,
Thanks.
That's all I say. Just go for it.
Thanks, Andrew, and then Tom.
Sure, I'm just going to add to Matt's point, and then don't care what anyone else does or thinks. Don't worry about the likes. Just get out there. It's, you know, you will do something different, and that's what will resonate.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, basically, always try and use your own material, and then that sort of forces you to learn what works.
Thank you. Faye, your last piece of advice.
Yeah, I'll pick up what Tom was saying. Actually, it's really important if you produce your own content, I believe. Like, besides the old like VJing type of thing, which was picking pieces of movies or others' works and patching together, I think it's so important to make your own things, your own artworks, and share them to the world. And also, yeah, it's really important to go out in the world and see as many shows you can, like how many, even involving new media arts and contemporary art that involves projections or immersive exhibitions. There's a lot of things, maybe not right at the moment that you can see live, but there's also, I don't know, like Sonar Festival, for instance, did like a streaming version, and there were a lot of AV performances and an installation that you could have experienced just by following their channel. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Faye, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say to find somebody that is willing to teach you. And that's always a good thing. Maybe spend some time with a professional or a friend, whoever is willing to teach you. But like you can do tutorials online, but sometimes I think it's just good. That's how I started, just working with people in a studio. You just go there, you say, this is what I want to do. They'll either teach you or they say, figure it out. And then you spend hours doing it, and somehow you get it. You either understand your own technique and you figure that out, or they give you like a little bit of advice, and eventually you'll just do your own thing. And because there's 100 ways of doing something. Everybody has their own technique. Everybody uses the software in a very specific way. So do it, go out there and be with a professional or a friend who's willing to teach you online as well. But somehow I just feel it's better to learn with somebody.
Great, thanks. And on that last piece of advice, I think you all agree the just do it line there. I'd just like to thank everybody for this. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully we've given the audience a real starting point with regard to getting involved with animation out in the open. I'd like to thank Tom Wall from blinkinLAB. I'd like to thank Matt Sharp from MoreEyes. I'd like to thank Andy Ellis from Fade In, Fade Out. I'd like to thank Federico and Faye from Deltaprocess, Dan from We Are Midnight, and Joris from Prismax. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you all at the next animation festival. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheerio.
Thank you.